actually wanted to pick up on a point that was raised just now. I've got your name from Unlimited, but it ties in very much with what Edge Fund's goals are, in that when we look at who's running organisations, whether it's fundraisers or other staff or the board, there is a massive problem with them all being run by people from very privileged backgrounds for the most part. And I think what we need and what Edge Fund tries to do is to give voice to people who don't have money and don't have power that people from more privileged backgrounds often have. And so often charities are speaking on behalf of others. And a lot of our applications that we get, we have, say, Why Refugee Women, it's a group run by and for refugee women, who said, we've had enough now of other charities speaking on our behalf and telling us what it is that we supposedly need. But there's not enough organisations that are supporting that kind of grassroots work. And so that was kind of our starting point, is how can we address that issue of putting decision making into the hands of the people who are most affected by the issues that we're actually trying to address. So I remembered earlier actually that the first time I came to an Alliance breakfast a good year or so ago, I sat in the audience and nervously asked Stephen if he knew of any foundations that were power sharing, and now I'm here sort of answering my own question. So yeah, during that time I've done a lot of research for Edge Fund, which has only been officially running since December, and really surprised how many different models there are. And it was quite difficult actually to write the article because it was difficult to kind of categorise because all the models were so different. Some of them involve donors, and it's more of a kind of collaborative process between donors and activists. Some of them have quite sort of traditional structures in terms of having committees, but it's the people that are on those committees that makes a difference. But there's also models where they're actually including applicants in the process as well. So there's really a wide range. And I realise as well that the ones that I've looked at have only been ones that I've found as an English speaker who doesn't speak any other languages. So I'm sure that there's many others out there that I didn't come across. And I think another thing that we drew a lot of inspiration from as well was looking at not so much the kind of top-down philanthropy, but how the kind of financial models that work at the grassroots, where it's more mutual aid. So, for example, Susu's in Trinidad, where you have people who put in a bit of money every month, and then each month it's someone else's turn to take the pot, kind of like friendly societies and things like that. So we thought a lot about how we could model a process on that as well that was just drawing on that mutual aid tradition. So just looking at a few of the funds that we've looked at over the last year or so, one of the newer ones, Red Umbrella Fund, which is a sex worker-led fund. So they're very niche in that they only support groups that are led by sex workers, but they themselves, as a foundation, are also led by sex workers. So 80% of their decision-making panels are actually sex workers, and the rest are donors. And this kind of model is very similar to the Disability Rights Fund, where on their committee the majority of people are actually disabled, and most are actually active in that field as well, as activists. So there are these sort of collaborations between foundations and activists, but then there's also collaborations between individual donors and activists as well. And one that's really stood out to me is the Social Justice Fund Northwest. And their process is really quite intensive, and I think some people would perhaps look at it and think, such a lot of admin and organisation to make it happen. I know we're still in this sort of world where people look at how much is how much they're actually spending on admin, and if it's more than 10%, then that's terrible. And but their actual process is transformative in itself, because they have people from very different backgrounds coming together in what they call giving projects rather than giving circles. And they go through this process over about 7 months together, where they learn about different issues. They work on cross-class and cross-race issues. They learn how to fundraise. They fundraise from their friends. They go and visit projects together. So it's a really transformative process in itself, where a very mixed group of people come together and decide how the funds are allocated. There are also plenty of funds that don't actually involve the donors at all. One that I also find really inspiring is the Southern Partners Fund. Barbara Mayer, she had a family foundation, and she decided that she wanted to basically pass that over to the community and let them run it for themselves. So she went through quite a process with a few of her grantees to first of all to sort of convince them that they wanted to take this on, and then she closed down her own foundation and then passed it over to the community to run for themselves. And all of these so far are still sort of sticking within that main sort of committee model, but it's just sort of, as I say, changing the people who are actually making those decisions. But there's also lots of other models as well that have moved away from that kind of panel structure. For example, the Community Foundation in Northern Ireland has got their process where they involve the whole community in setting the agenda and identifying what the needs are, and actually then deciding where the funds go. So again, it's almost like a community development process. So the process in itself has its own benefits as well as actually the benefits of giving the money away. And then finally, there are a few funds that actually do include the applicants themselves in the process. And the one that Stephen told me about was the Central American Women's Fund, who have inspired a newer fund called the Frida Young Feminist Fund. And they've only been running for about a year or so now, and all the applicants basically get to score and give feedback on all the other applicants. So, and with the Central American Fund, Women's Fund, they involve previous grantees as well. So they're completely handing over that decision making to their applicants and former grantees. So yeah, there was an awful lot for us to look at and figure out which way we wanted to go. And what we've actually done is we've set up under our cooperative structure. So at the moment we have 108 members who all have equal say. Some of them are donors and have put in £2,000. Some of them are applicants and are now grantees. But they all have equal say in the process. And in our final stage, this kind of scoring and shortlisting process is done online, so people basically just do that at home. But then the shortlisted groups come together with EDGE members during a sort of all-day meeting where both applicants and members get to learn more about the projects and then decide collectively how that pot should be distributed between the final 15 applicants, which is a wonderful process, as much as it sounds like it would be a bit of a fight for money with them all being in the same room, and you can't get away from the competition, unfortunately. But it's really inspiring to see people from very different backgrounds with very different issues that they're trying to deal with, who can see the connections between what's happening to them in their community and what's happening to someone else, and they're working together to decide the allocation of the funds. And accessibility actually has been one point that we've from the beginning felt was really important, because it is another way that foundations can use their power. So I agree with Stephen completely about being open to applications, because you quite often find that it's a very limited pool of who you're going to fund. If you're very close and you're not accepting applications, and it's likely to be people that the foundation knows that gets the money, and I think that reduces the possibility of those funds getting to the groups that are most marginalised and most need the support. So we try to keep the process really simple. People can apply over the phone, or it's a 2-page or 5 questions, about 2-page application, and we have members who can help them to apply as well. So yeah, it has been quite a process, but hopefully if you get a chance to have a look at a bit more of a description of the models in the magazine, there are so many there. I think every foundation that exists can draw something from one of those models that can help them be a bit more accountable and a bit more democratic in their process.
Thank you, Sophie.